In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And unfortunately, not all Space Marine chapters are created equal. Some are noble defenders of humanity, paragons of the Emperor's will. Others, they are walking disasters. A chapter can be considered the worst for many reasons. Maybe their gene seed is so flawed that they can barely function in battle. Or perhaps their tactics are so reckless that they suffer near total losses in every campaign. Some are so dishonorable that even the Inquisition watches them with suspicion, while others are just so painfully incompetent that they bring shame to the Adeptus Astartes. Whether it's corruption, bad luck, or sheer stupidity, the worst Space Marine chapter isn't just a disgrace to the Imperium, they are a liability to the entire war effort. And in a galaxy where battle is a desperate struggle for survival, this is a sin beyond forgiveness. And based on the title of this video, you probably know what chapter we're going to take a look at first, the Lamentors. Unlike normal successor chapters that usually follow a theme connected to some type of battlefield role or a historical culture from ancient Terra, the Lamentors are distinguished as a chapter with terrible luck. This chapter is one of the only ones that takes this perceived phenomenon and weaves it into the lore of the Lamentors, creating a truly memorable story. From being fooled into fighting against the Imperium during the Bad App Wars, to almost being destroyed by the Tyranids. This disastrous history goes all the way back to their origin, as the chapter was part of the Cursed founding in the 36th millennium. They were one of many Space Marine forces that suffered from various calamitous events at that time. I did want to showcase a great fan story created by Zachary Strupp, an amazing writer and a fan of the channel who wanted us to share his story. You can find his work on his website, filthyhorrors.com, which I'll link in the description below, and while you're there, check out his other great stuff. If you guys have your own fan-made stories that you guys would like to showcase on the channel, just shoot us a message either on Instagram, Twitter, or here on YouTube, and we'll gladly create a video for you. And if you enjoy this type of content, hit the like button on this video, share it with your friends, and most importantly, give us feedback in the comments below. But with all that said, let's get into the story written by Zachary Strupp, Brotherhood of Tears.
To me, Darius.
His brother captain's voice crackled over their private Vox channel. He tried to respond, but the storms that the heretics had summoned were disturbing communications. A miasma of psychic energy pulsed around him as he searched for his battle brothers. All he found was a hurricane of whispers in pink and blue. It would have been beautiful if not for the taint of corruption. Darius's power armor protected him to a point, but he could still feel it. Minuscule particles of the shimmering dust penetrating the grill of his Mark IV helm. It tasted like nightmares. Darius stared down the sight of his bolter and let loose a 3-shot burst as a demon of Tzeentch leapt through the wall of dust. The creature was half the size of an Astarte. Its squat body was a gaping maw that spit fire the color of children's wishes. Darius kicked it aside and ran deeper. He needed to find his brothers. They had arrived on this feudal world too late. Their Thunderhawk gunship had been swiped from the sky by the winds of magic. He'd only come to a few minutes prior, but by then they were all gone. Darius had fought his way through dozens of cultists and demons, but there had been no sign of his brothers.
Come meet death, heathens.
The words were followed by the booming rhythm of an autocannon. Darius ran over the hill and saw Brother Captain Aurelius Tristis stomp the head of a cultist into the sand. His commanding officer was an intimidating figure. His dark yellow Terminator plate stood 10 feet in height, dwarfing even the stoutest Space Marine. He bore the heraldry of his chapter on his right shoulder plate, a bleeding heart on a bed of checkered black and white. The brother captain spun on him, leveling the autocannon in his direction.
You heard my call, brother.
Aurelius bellowed. The red-eyed lenses of his helm dimmed as he lowered his weapon.
Where are Constantine and Velios?
Darius asked.
I have not seen them, but it's a blustery day. Have you not noticed?
Aurelius was odd for a member of their chapter. Lamentors were not known for their sense of humor, and yet Aurelius tried.
They are most likely dead.
That was more like it. Darius stepped beside his commander and surveyed what little he could see. The ground was littered with dead. Aurelius had been busy.
What are your orders?
Darius was hopeful that the answer would not be what he expected.
We kill as many as we can. We live to serve. We die in service.
He threw the autocannon to the ground and pulled his two-handed power sword from its sheath. The Birth of Sorrow was an ornate curved blade the length of a standard human. It was black as night, and when its power cells activated, it glowed like an ocean of stars. It is said that it was claimed after a great battle with a long-dead Xeno race, but Darius had never cared much to investigate further. The weapon made him uncomfortable. It radiated sadness.
For the Emperor,
Darius said, His voice was low, weighed down by the fulfilled expectation.
For the Emperor.
Aurelius roared into the sky. Then he calmed. He looked down at Darius.
Fret not, brother. For those we cherish, we die in glory.
It had been over a century since they had thrown their lot in with the Astral Claws. A century in the warp, fighting the forces of chaos as recompense for standing beside the only chapter that showed them their due respect. There were so few of them left. Darius wanted to fight, wanted to prove his loyalty, but he also wanted the chapter to survive. The whispers in the wind grew louder. Something was approaching. Darius steeled himself. He threw his bolter to the ground and freed his chainsword from his hip.
From blood born to blood evermore consigned. That is why I always appreciated you, Darius. You honor the old ways.
Suddenly lightning struck the ground in front of them, knocking Darius off his feet. Aurelius staggered back a step as the enemy force emerged. They were surrounded. Cultists, demons, and abhuman wretches closed in all around them.
Brother, we need not fight.
A sickly voice came from above. Oberon Talikos descended from the sky. He rode a disc of purple flesh. The thing wiggled and slurped as the tentacles around its base slapped the sand. Oberon oozed corruption in an aura of greenish blue. His armor was a midnight plate trimmed in gold. The trim extended into needle-like spines all around him. He wore a kilt of living eyes that lolled in their cloth prison. His helm had mutated into the appearance of a raven. Its eye lenses pulsed with blinding luminosity as its ceramite feathers twitched.
You are a heretic, Oberon.
Aurelius boomed.
You will face the Emperor's justice. After all your chapter has faced, you still cling to that withered corpse. The Imperium betrayed you, murdered your brothers, and cast you out into the war. As the Emperor burned Prospero, so did he burn you. Join us, brothers. My God is generous. He will change you. He will turn your despair into something else. We are not your brothers.
Aurelius charged, his blade leveled at the heretic's beak.
Fool.
Oberon flicked his hand in the brother captain's direction. Lightning leapt from his fingers. The cords of dancing energy lashed Aurelius' shoulder, licked at his chest and caressed his back. His armor sizzled, darkening from mustard to black as the righteous champion fell to his knees dead.
No!
Darius screamed and ran at the sorcerer. A lash of energy bolted towards his chest. Instincts threw him to the ground in a somersault. Lightning struck all around him, but he dodged it effortlessly. His rage was pure. He could feel the light of the Emperor upon him. Fiery lashes seared gouged in his armor. The pain was excruciating, but he was undeterred. He jumped at Oberon and spun, bringing his blade down upon the enemy. The sorcerer materialized a staff in his hand to block the attack, but Darius was clever. The snarling teeth of his chainsword missed the staff by a breath, and the last lamenter dropped his weapon into the disc of Tzeentch. The creature screamed, bucking Oberon onto the ground. The scream was like needles massaging Darius' senses. He dropped his sword and clamped his hand over the side of his helmet. His battle plate should have been able to mask the cry, but it couldn't keep up with the rapidly changing pitches. The noise was every horrible memory from Darius' life. Every failure, every betrayal, every misspoken word, it all flooded into him. He fell to the ground convulsing.
You have potential.
Oberon lifted himself from the ground with a snap of his fingers.
It would be boring for you to find peace in death.
The sorcerer's staff evaporated, and he held his hand over the lamenter. Words flowed from his throat that made Darius' skin ache. He was being suffocated by the power the heretic had invoked. A black pool formed underneath him. It was cold like the void. Darius' power armor was useless against its pull. His chest plate groaned and cracked as the cold embraced it. He clawed to Aurelius and pressed his helmet against his fallen brother's.
I have failed you, my friend. Touch. Know this, slave of the corpse. When your guilt has bled you dry, when you have nothing left, not even your beloved melancholy, I will find you. On that day, I shall kill you, Darius Sparrow.
The dark pool beneath Darius shattered like an obsidian mirror. Darius felt the rush of great height as he descended into the abyss, but heard nothing. The speed of the fall was immense, but there was no sound of turbulence or roaring crosswind. The g-force of his descent increased, and he felt his consciousness wane. Just before he joined the darkness, he saw himself in the throne room of Terra. He was resplendent in golden armor, the heraldry of his legion all gone, replaced by symbols the likes of which he'd never seen before. Darius wanted to call out, to ask what it meant, but it was too late. Darius was gone. Now let's move on to another one of the worst Space Marine chapters, the Dark Suns. Although most Space Marine chapters work independently of not only the Imperium of Man, but also other Adeptus Astartes chapters, there are some successors that follow in the footsteps of their more venerable chapters, like those that come from the early foundings. This tutelage is most often seen with battle brothers that share a lineage or possess the same gene seed. Such is the case for one of the Imperium's most vaunted Ultramarine successor chapter, the Dark Suns. Imperial records show that the Dark Suns adapted their combat doctrines and beliefs not just from their progenitor the Ultramarines, but instead the Nova Marines chapter. It is rumored that upon the chapter's founding, the Dark Suns' ranks were filled with veteran Nova Marine battle brothers. Together, the two chapters trained alongside each other and became almost identical in battle and ideology. To learn more about the Nova Marines chapter, check out our 40 facts on the Nova Marines, link above or below. Nevertheless, the Dark Suns have attempted to distinguish themselves from their teacher, and have taken the mantle of protecting the Segmentum Obscurus. Similar to the heraldry of the Nova Marines, the Dark Suns don a quarter pattern color scheme on their armor, but chose dark green and white, as opposed to the blue and white of the Nova Marines. They have a purple right knee plate. Their chapter badge is very similar in appearance as well, a stylized green 12-pointed star, with a green circle at the center, unlike the skull of the Nova Marines. When not dealing with other Space Marines, the Battle Brothers of the Dark Suns are viewed as having an arrogant pride in themselves. This egotism has soured many dealings with other Imperial military forces, and has led to some friction between the chapter and the Astra Militarum. On top of their lack of humility, the Dark Suns are not opposed to drastic military actions in order to enforce their will on a planet or a battlefield. Reportedly, the Dark Suns are notorious for resorting to the use of exterminatus in their quest to secure victory over an enemy. Although a terrible outcome for the Imperial citizenry, this disregard for human life gains the chapter many victories, even when facing remarkable odds. What would be perceived as carelessness by most logical military forces is actually disregarded by the Dark Suns due to their monodominant ideology, which means that the chapter has a strong belief that the only way the Imperium of Man can survive is if all other factions in the galaxy, the Xeno, Chaos, and the Heretic, is utterly destroyed, which means that there is 0 degree of tolerance for any form of heresy, and the only possible punishment for heresy is death. As such, the Dark Suns are known as ruthless, narrow-minded Space Marines who leave untold devastation and slaughter in their wake, frequently doing more harm than good, but always eradicating the enemy. Even amongst their fellow Space Marines, the Dark Suns proved to be difficult to work with. Such was the case during the Angelus Crusade, when the chapter contributed a contingent of battle brothers to retake the Jericho Reach. This force was under the command of Captain Tarnius Demos of the 2nd Company. A decorated and experienced battle brother, he had achieved victories in countless battles against the Xeno that threatened mankind. Demos had been considered more than once for promotion to Chapter Master of the Dark Suns. However, his towering hubris and recklessness had held him back, for Demos was a supremely prideful man. During the outset of the Angelus Crusade, a great council of senior Space Marine commanders of several dozen chapters came to contribute forces to the crusade. The only matter of business that remained was the election of an overall commander. Lorgoth Mac Lear of the Storm Wardens chapter was voted in nearly unanimously to lead the Council of War in their decision regarding the crusade. Demos was gravely insulted by this decision, believing that only he was truly capable of success in such a grand undertaking in the name of the Emperor. To prove himself to be a better commander, he challenged MacLear to an honor duel. Several of the gathered observers noted afterwards that the duel of such martial finesse and power was rare outside of the Feast of Blades. MacLear irrefutably had the upper hand for solar hours. His meticulous study of combat shield techniques gave Demos no opportunity for a decisive blow. Yet Demos relentlessly assailed the chapter master with powerful hits, hammering MacLear with such force that the stone floor began to crack beneath the Storm Warden. In the end, it was MacLear who finally made a crucial error, and Demos landed the final blow. Defeated, MacLear knelt before Demos, and officially declared him commander of the Adeptus Astartes Council in the Angelus Crusade. Demos bowed his head, and reflected upon the matter for many tense heartbeats. Finally, he beckoned MacLear to stand. Demos had never fought such a worthy opponent, and even through his own pride, he realized that the Storm Warden Chapter Master understood the burden of command. Thus Demos declared Lorgoth MacLear should lead the Space Marines into the Jericho Reach. Demos returned to his strike cruiser, content in knowing that the Space Marines of the Angelus Crusade possess an exemplary commander. The rest of the Space Marines were like, bitch, we already knew this. The Dark Hunter's arrogance doesn't always get in the way of providing aid for other military forces. The chapter participated in the first Punisher War, when the infamous Chaos Space Marine warband known as the Punishers led a massive chaos invasion of the Kargad system. The Dark Hunters chapter led the defense of its homeworld, but was woefully outnumbered by the forces of Chaos. The Punishers landed 250,000 Chaos cultists in the first wave upon the planet, with a mighty Emperor-class battleship to back them up. It took the help of 6 other chapters, including the Dark Suns, to finally exterminate the Punishers from their system. Without their help, the Dark Hunters would have faced certain annihilation. Many years later, in the Second Punisher War, the Dark Suns would aid the Dark Hunters again against the forces of Chaos. However, they would inform the Inquisition of the Dark Hunters' alliance with the Xeno scum known as the Eldari, an action that would see Captain Jonah Kern of the Dark Hunters punished for this crime, although the alliance saved the planet from complete annihilation. It would mark the Dark Suns as punk-ass snitches. If you guys want more Space Marine lore, please check out our deep dive on Space Marines. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.